This is Dr. David Pomeroy, your host on ADHD Focus. I wanted to remind you that the show is not intended to be a recommendation for diagnosis or treatment of any condition for any specific person. Please consult your mental health professional or doctor managing your ADHD or mental health issues about any diagnosis or treatment-related information that you hear on the show. Refer your ADHD provider to the show if he or she would like more information.
And I'm happy you're all back here again. I want to put a quick pitch in for a show coming up next week on as part of what's called the Podcastathon, which is a number of different podcasts and people supporting different nonprofits and asking for donations to those nonprofits. And I'm going to be supporting findtheadhdgirls.org with my guest, Cynthia Hammer, who is the founder of that organization. So take a listen next week. And of course, it will be remaining on all the podcast channels and Experts and Authors TV and Apple TV, same places my podcast can be found. Today, we're going to be talking about myths and misinformation about ADHD, which is out there all over the place. And my guest is Ari Tuckman, who's a psychologist in the Philadelphia area, also speaker and author of many books. The latest one is the ADHD Productivity Manual. And since productivity, at least of the things we're supposed to be producing and on time, is a big issue for all of us with ADHD. It sounds like a great support for us. So, Ari, welcome to the program.
Well, it's good to be back. Good to see you.
Same here. So, myths about ADHD, and there are a number of them. What are your, I guess, top one, two that you hear?
Oh man, I've got a bunch of them. I think, one is, ADHD is just overdiagnosed. One is, some variation of you just have to try harder. And I think another one that I love to hate, if it makes sense, is, stimulants are addictive, or they're going to make you a drug addict. That's another one that makes me want to break things. So, yeah, those are a few.
Yep. And I'd certainly second each of those. The stimulants are addictive, or I should say, stimulants will make you become addicted, is not true for those of us with ADHD. Yes, they are addictive in many people. Yep, they should have warning labels about that. But for people with ADHD, they help get thoughts coordinated, be able to plan things, be able to stay attention, resist the impulse to move. And if we take more than we need, it doesn't feel good.
Right.
The heart's really racing, or you get a terrible headache. And so there's no incentive to take more and more. So I don't believe someone with ADHD can become addicted. Do people get dependent on it? Well, yeah, we're dependent on dopamine working the right way. Everybody is. And so, yes, it helps that function better. But that doesn't mean you're addicted to it, looking for more and more and getting high from it. That just doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, the thing of it is, for those who do wind up becoming dependent on it in a problematic way, it's because they're looking for it to do more than it should. So they're getting 5 hours of sleep a night, and they're looking for some way to not feel tired, right? Which you're supposed to feel with 5 hours. So, but that is very much the subset of folks out there. And exactly as you said, most people, if you give them too much, they will feel worse and they will complain and tell you to give them less. So, but my kind of smart ass line about these medications are addictive is, if this medication is really that addictive, why do so many of my clients forget to take it? right? They forget it in the morning. They forget to call their doctor for a refill. They forget to stop by the pharmacy to pick it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think by definition, if you forget it, it is not addictive, right? So
Yes.
to really sort of hammer the point, my really smart ass line here is no heroin addict has ever gotten to mid-afternoon and said, "Oh, wait a second. I don't think I took my heroin today."
Yeah.
Right. So,
Exactly.
um,
Exactly.
yeah. So that, and the reason why it makes me so crazy is besides the fact that it's just factually incorrect for the vast majority of people, is that it scares people away from a treatment that is
Mm-hmm.
generally really quite effective, is generally safe and well tolerated in terms of side effects, or at least you can work on, minimizing the side effects. So you're
Mm-hmm.
scaring people away from something that's going to make a positive difference in their life. And therefore, you're putting them at the greater risk of all the ways that untreated
Yes.
ADHD makes
Yes.
your life harder, makes it worse, increases the risk for like, car accidents and other sort of problematic situations. So like it's not just annoying that it's incorrect, it's that it like legitimately hurts people to
Yes.
scare them
Yes.
away from effective treatments.
And I agree. I think so many times there's a risk of this, risk of that, but the risk of not treating the ADHD isn't mentioned. And
Right.
it's, I think, 2 to 4 times increased number of um, car accidents and higher
Yeah.
personal and property damage in those. And actually, a higher risk of substance abuse in
Yes.
teens whose ADHD has not been treated. And
Yeah.
that risk is less for children who've been treated starting at age 8 than it is for those at age 10, than it is for those at age 12. And it's higher, like 4 to 5 times higher for someone who's not treated at all for their ADHD. So it
Yeah.
really makes a huge difference in the lives of people, not to say ability to hold a job, stay in a relationship, any number of kinds of
Yeah.
things that are
I
very,
mean,
very real.
in all sorts of big ways. And the thing about some of the folks who kind of use these scare tactics is they use the worst case scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where there was really problematic prescribing, or the diagnosis was completely wrong, or there was some other significant factor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like, it is exactly like saying, I know someone who is horribly mangled and killed in a car accident, so nobody should have a car.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like you can't take the one in a million and say, therefore, we should get rid of it for everybody without considering, I mean, for all the issues with cars and whatever. But like, I think in general, probably we would all agree that like society is better when there are cars, right? That people have the ability
Mm-hmm.
to get around beyond what they can walk or bike to. So like, so you can't only take the worst case scenario and then use that as the only and one-sided, justification
Yeah,
for,
thing
the
you're
position
looking
you
at.
take. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, and I look at the the fact that it's in the name attention deficit disorder.
Mm.
Unfortunately, it was named a long time ago, and I think the early 1990s when that was picked. And it's not a deficit, it's a difference. People with ADHD can pay attention, great. It's just not the things they should be paying attention to
Sure.
all the time, whether it's a conversation or um, anything else, or what they're doing. Um, and many times people say, well, if you just try harder, it's just you don't have the willpower. Well, I can take my glasses off and use all the willpower I want, but I can't read
Exactly.
what's on
Right.
the board. I have to have the glasses on. But
Yep.
that's an easy biologic difference to measure. and easy one to correct. You don't see the difference of ADHD in terms of, oh, there isn't a little label say your dopamine isn't working now. Um,
Sure.
and that's so you see it in the behaviors. Um, Another thing I've seen recently referred to more and more is the fact or the statement people with ADHD have lower levels of dopamine. No,
Mm.
they don't. They have plenty. It's just there isn't enough in the area to help transmit the signals in one or some areas of the brain that have to do with staying focused and inhibiting the impulse to move and remembering things. Um, so there's plenty there. It's just getting pulled back into the place cells it started in instead of getting the signal over to where it needs to
Yeah.
go for those areas to function well.
Yeah, this is one of those things that this kind of bugs me a little bit as well, but that kind of as you're saying, dopamine is used in a lot of parts of the brain to do a lot of different functions. And,
Mm-hmm.
the medication for ADHD has effect on dopamine transmission in specific parts of the brain. The medication for Parkinson's, which is also dopamine related, acts in other parts of the brain and not on
Mm-hmm.
the parts related to ADHD and vice versa. But the thing that kind of bugs me is when people talk about dopamine, like the thing of like, oh, I'm going to go cliff jumping and it's going to, boost my dopamine or something, right? Like talking about the sort of reward association of dopamine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing rewarding, exciting things increases your dopamine. Um, but that the thing is with ADHD, it's not about like almost like more gasoline, so to speak. It's more about more brakes, right? It's about more brake
Mm-hmm.
fluid that
Yep.
folks with ADHD don't have enough brakes basically to say, what's that over there? Oh, hold on. Nope, not that. Like resist the distraction. Don't look over there. Or
Mm-hmm.
like don't blurt out the thing that you're thinking. Or don't click yes, purchase now. Right. Hold on a sec. Or don't tell your boss what is perhaps true but not wise to say out loud.
Yeah.
Like it's not enough breaks, right? In that when
Mm-hmm.
you add in some additional dopamine, really sort of that's a simple way of saying it, but the medication for ADHD increases the brake fluid, right? It's a better ability to
Yep.
say, hold on a sec, rather than just automatically responding and,
Mm-hmm.
getting distracted, acting impulsively, somehow shooting yourself in the foot.
Yes, and that happens that thinking through things, processing and looking ahead at what the action is going to um, result in, that happens in this area in the very front part of the brain, what we call the prefrontal cortex. And that's where the, I guess, physiologic glitch is, where dopamine normally gets released, and it does with people with ADHD. When the signal comes down to the end of the nerve, it gets released so it can carry the signal across to the next one. And there's a system to pull back the dopamine to where it started, recycle it essentially. Our body's
Yep.
really good at recycling things. Well, that's going too fast with ADHD. And that's most of the time genetically programmed. You can't think it's slower. You can't learn how to make it go slower. That's what it's going to do.
Yep. Yep.
So it pulls the dopamine back out of this connection area and it just can't make the connections. Well, the stimulant medications slow down that reuptake. So then there's more dopamine where it needs to be. And the signal can get through. And you can pay attention and stop thinking, oh no, this isn't a time to be moving around and getting up and going over to talk to my friend. I'm supposed to be sitting here and paying attention. Or wait a minute, I don't need to buy these four different things. What am I doing here? Or, nah, that's probably not a good thing to say right now. And those are all our functions in that prefrontal cortex area. Other
Yep.
areas where dopamine is used, in what an area called the basal ganglia, that's associated with Parkinson's, when it's not working well. But that doesn't mean it doesn't, the people with ADHD are going to have Parkinson's. No, different functions. Just
Yep.
like if you're,
Different genes.
yeah, and you're buying something in a store, you're using money, that's the dopamine, but you use it at the hardware store, you're going to get a paintbrush. You can't buy a paintbrush at the bakery, but you can buy a donut. And usually you can't buy a donut at the hardware store. So you're still using money, but different functions in different areas. Um, so it's not a lack of dopamine, and it's not dopamine doesn't do the same thing everywhere. Um, One of the other, I guess, things that bothers me a lot is whether it's kind of testimonials or statements about, it may be about supplements, it may be about even new medications, say, oh, it's scientifically proven. Well, yes, it could be. There could be a study that show these rats can pay attention to the maze better than those, but that doesn't necessarily mean it works in people, or
Sure.
it's statistically significant. Great. This number, this result isn't just because of chance. There is a real difference. Does it make a difference clinically in terms of how the person acts or what they're able to do? Maybe not,
Sure.
but the numbers are different. So they're the devil's in the details. And a lot of headlines I see, and this is one thing that really bothers me about a lot of the articles, whether it's in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, many places, that say, oh, this is twice as likely if you're taking amphetamines. Yes, it's 4 out of 1,000 instead of 2 out of 1,000.
Sure.
It's true, it's
Yep.
twice as likely, but it's
Yeah.
not a heck of a lot. So it
Yeah.
doesn't make
It
a,
doubles your chances of getting struck by lightning.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so it's a
I
way to
think,
emphasize that the negative without really looking at the numbers and the actual what it means.
yeah. And I mean, the thing about any of these alternative treatments, you know, I mean, basically the bottom line is none of the alternative treatments have anything close to proven efficacy. Like there's no reason to believe any of these are likely to be effective. So dietary changes, nutritional supplements, brain training programs, chiropractic interventions, I don't know what else. Like none of that stuff. Like natural remedies, that one always cracks me up. The world is full of poisonous things. Why does natural make it better? I don't know. Like that doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense to me. But like none of these things have anything close to evidence to say that they're effective. And
Mhm.
even when they quote research that they have, it's usually either just garbage research, right? It's if you do a bad study design, it doesn't tell you anything at all.
Mhm.
Or there are so many steps away from what they tested to now what is being claimed that it's like,
Yes.
you know, or even, and this is like a lot of chiropractic interventions, it's sort of this thing where it's like you don't even need to run the experiment because for this to be true, we would need to rewrite massive amounts of just fundamental science and understanding of neurology. Right. So like
Mhm.
all this stuff about like the two sides of the brain communicate, like that's not ADHD. Like that has nothing to do with ADHD. Like it
Mhm.
is just the whole thing top to bottom is just nonsense. And yet, like you look online and it's hard, and you've got influencers talking about stuff
Mhm. Mhm.
because either they're getting paid, or if you're an influencer, you can't, like, if you do a post that says you should probably get more sleep, right? That one's not going viral. They're not making money on that post. But if they
Yeah.
come up with some crazy, ridiculous thing, maybe it catches and now they're making money off it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
They sound great.
right. Um, so like bottom line is none of that stuff has been shown to be effective. And it's just, I mean, you do what you want, but I don't think it's worth your time or
Mhm.
money.
Yeah, and the side effects, it may be benign, it may be taking more um of one combination of amino acids and herbal things and everything. They may be harmless, but that doesn't mean they're going to work. And yes, stimulants are not something to take lightly, and they need to be prescribed appropriately and taken the way they're supposed to be. Um, you don't shoot up Adderall and have it help your ADD better, and you don't
Yeah,
take twice as much to try to get twice the benefit. No, you're going to feel terrible. So you
sure.
take it as it should be, and when it's been appropriately diagnosed and really not just 10 minutes and, oh, yeah, you answered these questions and you have 7 out of 9 of these things, therefore you have ADD. No, it takes time to really sort through a lot of other things. It's not just a rating scale. Um, and someone recently, I think I'm attributing this right, a woman, Dr. Jan Walcorn, um, was asked, well, are there a lot more ADHD diagnoses? And she said, yes, just how suddenly there were a lot more stars when we had better telescopes.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
you can
Exactly.
look at it and there's more emphasis. I think a lot of during COVID, when kids were home at school and parents could see, boy, you're not being able to pay attention at all. You're bouncing all over the place. They got looking into it and then they got thinking, that's kind of like me when I was in school. And so then they look at it more. And so, yes, more women between the ages, I think it was 25 and 45, are getting prescriptions for stimulants. Yep. And
Yep.
more of them realized they had ADHD. The telescope got better. They could see it better. And so I don't think they're more false diagnoses. I think they're more appropriate diagnoses, even because more people are wondering about it and there's um, better focus on it. No pun intended. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I think especially for certain groups, like, middle-aged women, the partly why there's so many more diagnoses now is they've been completely ignored or
yes.
largely, I'll say largely ignored before. So it's almost like there was this pent-up demand, right? There's all these people out there who indeed have ADHD but never been diagnosed, and all of a sudden we're like, hey, maybe we should look at women also. And then like
Hmm.
lo and behold, there they are. Um,
Yes. And they have different ways of showing it. Their behaviors aren't the same. Um, Probably more boys have the hyperactive form and fewer girls do, but many girls have the inattentive form. And certainly what I've seen with many of my patients who are in high school, most of the time girls are bound and determined they're going to get the homework done. That
yeah,
could be because they don't want to be labeled the person who's flunking, or they want to please their teacher or their parents. I think there's a big component of, if I'm perfect, then I can't be criticized. Uh,
yeah,
Having been criticized a lot, nope, I'm going to make sure that. So they're up till 1 a.m. finishing the homework. Now they're sleep deprived because they have to get up at 6,
yep,
but their grades are fine. Oh, you can't have ADD, your grades are good. That doesn't have anything to do with it. Um, and that's one of the things that bothers me the most about the way schools interpret how much impact ADHD is having. They'll say, well, your grades are fine. You couldn't have ADD. And they aren't looking at the fact that, yes, the person has two tutors. One or the other parent is helping them with homework every single night. They're up till 1
sure,
a.m. Yet they're getting good grades, but they can't do any other activities because that's what they're doing. Um,
yeah. And I think that that's an important point, right? Because, to qualify for a diagnosis, there has to be some level of impairment, meaning it has to have
mhm.
some sort of measurable negative effect on your functioning or your happiness or something. And if you're failing a bunch of classes, that's pretty obvious, or if you're scraping by with like C minuses, and you're certainly smarter than that, right? We could say like, well, clearly this student's not living to potential. But exactly as you said, more so with girls than boys, on paper they look pretty good, so the school may not know it, but
Hmm.
I think there's a fundamental difference, right? Not everyone has to stay up till 4 in the morning. Not
Right,
everyone takes
right.
4 hours to do 2 hours worth of work. Um,
Hmm.
or, is some students just sort of like little by little work on that big paper over the course of a few days or a week, and then they go to bed at 10 p.m. and they get a good night of sleep and they hand it in. Other people forget they had it or kind of vaguely know, but still procrastinate and then stay up most of the night to do it. Still good paper, right?
Hmm.
So, like, that's definitely a thing that I look for is what does it take to make it happen, particularly if someone has
Hmm.
like high levels of conscientiousness, as you're describing with these girls.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the analogy I use, and this is a little bit sort of like intentionally like over the top, but um, sort of the idea that that the process matters, not just the end result, is if
Hmm.
I go to the bar tonight, I get completely hammered and then I drive myself home, but I somehow don't kill anyone and I don't get into an accident, right? Is it a reasonable position to say like clearly I'm awesome at drunk driving, there's no problem here, I'm just really good at this, right? Like no, obviously not. Like this is a terrible process, do not
Yeah.
keep doing this. And just like with a girl who's staying up till 1 in the morning, or if I was stupid enough to keep drinking and driving, eventually you crash, right? Like it's not sustainable. You can do it until you can't do it.
Hmm. Hmm. And yeah, and the cost is not having the time and ability to do social clubs or other activities,
Yeah.
or not doing those well, not being able to be like other kids and participate, um, and that may be happening throughout life, and maybe someone can do okay, get out of high school where sometimes you have to do things you aren't really interested in. Now you're able to do things you want to, maybe do pretty well in college, but then 10 years later, you have two children and a job and a marriage and a house you're trying to manage. That stretches executive functions way beyond what the mind of somebody with ADHD can deal with,
Yeah.
um, because the processing is different, the thinking is different. And we now can actually measure that. You can look at what's termed a functional MRI while someone's doing a task and look at a map of which neuron patterns are firing. It's different in people with ADHD than it is people without, um, just as it's different in people who can't hear very well or have auditory processing, things don't fit together, um, and different than people who can hear fine and their processing is good. So a lot of times there'll be talk about processing speed and working memory, keeping things in mind so that you can use that information in the next minute, for instance. And that's a kind of shorthand way of saying thinking, or thinking is a shorthand way of saying that, because that's what's involved in thinking, putting pieces together. And if it takes you longer to do that, partly because you've forgotten some of the pieces, then you can't think as fast. And that may be the way what's happening with the brain of someone with ADHD, but it comes out as, oh, you're dumb, or you can't finish tests or whatever. Well, you may know the material just fine. It takes you longer to put the facts together.
Yeah. I mean, it's more effortful.
Yes,
It takes
yes.
more effort. It can take more time. There's more sort of like last minute stress and scrambling, which takes its own toll.
Hmm.
So yeah, just doing the standard amount of stuff, so to speak, it's more depleting. Um, and there can come a point where that is no longer sustainable.
Hmm. Yes, and I think uh, one of the important points you mentioned was the idea of impairments. There needs to be an impairment. So some people have compensated, um, and I'm thinking of one unique situation, a mother of a number of children, like 8 children. She will admit, I probably have ADHD, many of my children do, but one of the older children can keep track of whose medication is needed
Mm.
and which person's taking which medicine. And mom can function otherwise in terms of cooking and keeping track of these kids need clothes now, here and there, and functions outside the home socially at church or in PTA or whatever. So there's no impairment to her function. Does she have ADHD? Yes, she has many of the characteristics that you can measure, and she'd say, yes, I forget things, but it's compensated for by a system that she's put together and relies on her oldest daughter to do that. Um, so does she need treatment for it? No, probably not. She doesn't need to take stimulants because they're not going to necessarily improve her function any more than it already is. Um, so the impairment needs to be there just because, and I think some people would say, well, I put things off and I forget where stuff is, and it's hard for me to keep attention in a conversation, so I must have ADHD. No, not necessarily. Okay, those are three. Well, usually we figure seven, maybe for adults, five or six of a number of different things. And the fact that nothing else can explain it. And that some of those things were present when you were 10. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's also a matter of degree, right? In the sense, like, we all, let's say, sometimes get distracted in conversations, right? That's just being human and fallible.
mhm,
But, it's sort of how much, again, back to impairment, right? How much does it negatively impact you, right? Is it causing sort of strife in your relationship? Is it
mhm,
causing issues at work where, you tune out in meetings and miss important things and, that then affects the quality of your work? Or, you're self-conscious about asking like, oh crap, I think I tuned out in the middle there. I wonder, I really need to talk to my boss, but I don't want to ask what the deal is because then they're going to know I wasn't paying attention and then they're going to think I don't care enough, right? So you get into the social consequences of it.
mhm.
So like that's very different from, yeah, once in a while I think about other things and I miss what someone says, like that's like annoying perhaps, but it's not impairing.
Yes, and it doesn't happen necessarily all the time. Yes, it could be a boring meeting and you already know you think you know most of the details of it. And the person who's talking just has a really nice, soft, slow voice, and it's very easy to just kind of get lulled into thinking this is boring. And you think about something else. Um, but that doesn't happen all the time. And with some with ADHD, maybe 95% of the time it's there. If it's a really interesting subject, it's something you know about and you want to contribute and you have things that it's just a challenging um, puzzle to put together this new program or one thing or another. People with ADHD can pay attention very well, and that's that attention difference when there's a charge from it. And this gets back to the dopamine. Yes, it has one function in the prefrontal cortex area, another in the basal ganglia. And when it gets to an area that's termed the reward center, man, that feels really good. So you want to keep doing more of that. And if you know the subject, it gives you a charge. You're interested in figuring out how to write this new program to do something, and you've got ideas on how that can work. Boy, you can do great. But you can't remember to pick up the milk on the way home, which is pretty basic and simple. You come home with tomatoes, but you at least you want credit for the fact you got to the grocery store. But those details aren't really that important, aren't interesting.
Yeah.
It's that difference of attention.
Yeah. Well, and again with the social impacts, right? If you bring home nine things on the list, but you forget one of them, on the one hand, sure, I suppose that's still an A minus, right? That's a 90. But depending on which one that is, your partner might be, let's just say more frustrated about the one that's missing and less grateful about the nine you got, So,
right.
So it then becomes this thing of like, I try so hard and yet, like, what's the point anyway? So, that then the whole couple's dynamic gets, built around that, and it's not a happy place for either person.
No, no. I'm lost the thought here about other diagnoses in ADHD. And I guess that, well, some people would have an anxiety disorder. Whatever's going on, something bad's going to happen.
Yep.
Wherever that comes from. Well, and that's turned generalized anxiety. About 30 to 35% of people with ADHD also have separately diagnosable anxiety. And this gets back to some of those studies where they'll say, well, we want it just to be about ADD. So we aren't going to count people with bad anxiety. We aren't going to count people that really have bad depression. Certainly we don't want to count anybody with bipolar disorder. Well, you've just eliminated about 60% of the people who have ADHD also. So you aren't going to have a valid conclusion because you haven't included all these other things that go along with ADHD. We aren't little boxes of one thing and another. A person is all those together.
Yeah.
And the challenge is sorting that out. So to say, oh, yeah, everybody who forgets things and is quick to jump onto something else or try to escape what's uncomfortable. People are doing that who have bad anxiety. They don't necessarily have ADD. So it's not just a simple look at this rating scale, look at that rating scale, look at 2 points of a 20-point history that you need and conclude, oh, you must have it, or you don't. I saw one record that a mom brought in of a child I was seeing, and it was a record from a psychiatrist they'd seen. And the psychiatrist, in his discussion of it, said, well, the child obviously doesn't have any attention problems because he paid attention to this handheld thing for the whole hour his mother and I were talking. Yeah, for an 8-year-old, it's a lot more interesting to do your whatever handheld computer game thing than it is to listen to two adults talk.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with having an attention difference.
Yeah, put that kid in math class. Let's see how his attention is.
Yes. Or maybe it's great in math, but man, he wants nothing to do with all the reading and the writing and something else. So everybody's brain is different in the way it works. I think we may have hit that most of the high points of the things that bother me. One of the others, and this is when there are articles in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, people may give that more credence and say, oh, this must be accurate because it's a magazine, a newspaper, a publication, which has a high reputation for good, solid reporting. That doesn't mean it's correct. Those people have a bias. There are professional papers written in professional journals, reviewed by a number of people and accepted, that have later been refuted and withdrawn. The study said, no, this study really wasn't done well. But when it first gets out there, oh, see, this must be the way it is because it's a reputable publication. Nope, doesn't always mean it's right. People have biases in what they want others to believe.
And it's interesting with the New York Times specifically, if we look at the last few years, they've had a bunch of actually really good articles on ADHD. And then they've had a couple, including one in New York Times Magazine that was just terrible. And by terrible, I'm not saying I don't like what they said. What I'm saying is terrible in the sense that like it really contradicted the science and research and what we know to be true. Like it either said a lot of things that were factually inaccurate, or it didn't quite say it. Like it didn't literally come out and say it, but it sure as hell spun it in a way so as to suggest, right? It sort of led the reader to the conclusion without actually saying. It's sort of like, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he had an affair, right? Like, if I leave it there, right, are you going to think? Oh, well, clearly that guy didn't, right? Like, no, the takeaway is, wow, that guy must have had an affair, right? But like, technically, Your Honor, I didn't state that he was, so therefore, I'm clean here. And I have to admit, it was really kind of hard to understand how that article got by the editors of the New York Times. Like it was baffling for a lot of us how this article that was really kind of repeating a lot of kind of like talking points from the Scientologists from like decades ago. Like, how did this make it into the top newspaper in the country? It was just bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of those kinds of statements you're talking about, and I've seen in some insurance companies will say, well, the person who made the diagnosis isn't a psychiatrist. Okay, that may be true, and that implies and only a psychiatrist should be making this diagnosis, which is not true.
Right.
Plenty of people have the training and the interest to gain the knowledge, and they can make the diagnosis. And no, they aren't a psychiatrist, but that doesn't mean they can't appropriate make the diagnosis.
Well, and stuff like that is clearly the insurance company's attempt to disqualify many claims. Like it's just about saving money. Like, let's be clear, not that everybody doesn't know that already. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of, what are you doing based on what reasons and why are you doing it? So, I think often when, people are sort of, I don't know, like either misciting the research or just plain don't know it, and are talking against ADHD, like, oh, it's not real, or like it's overdiagnosed or it's overtreated or whatever. It's that, like as always, I mean, we all have an agenda, but, there's always like, there is something to be gained from it, that either they're selling or promoting some alternative, right? And they're looking for market share, basically, even though, what they're promoting is unlikely to be helpful, or kind of politically or social causes, or there's some other reason why they're kind of doing what they're doing. And, it's just, I don't know, like, again, it doesn't make it accurate. And I think things that are inaccurate have a tendency to hurt people somehow or other.
Yes. And it influences people to discount the fact that these people's brains work differently than most others. So we end up with misunderstandings and myths, mistaken beliefs out there. So I'm sure we could talk through more of those, but we've, I think, hit the ones that bother each of us the most. And I think we represent a lot of the people who are in the forefront of research and publishing and talking about ADHD, that these are common problems that are perpetuated one way or another. The fact that it's not just willpower, it's not a defect, it's just a different way that brains work. So, Ari, it's been great to talk with you. Ari Tuckman is a psychologist in the Philadelphia area, an author of a number of books, and including his last one, which is the ADHD Productivity Manual, which is now one I just heard about and today, and so I'll be looking that up and seeing about either applying it to myself or certainly letting other of my patients know about that. So thank you very much, Ari, for your time. It's always great to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for this.
So long. Thank you, everybody, for your attention and listening here to ADHD Focus. I'm your host, David P. Pomeroy, and we'll talk to you next time.